KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother, Dagan the Woodsman Moriarty. Dagan, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I don't know why it just popped in my head, but I was thinking of that old ad with the crying Indian when he observes all the...
Oh, yeah, and it's like zooms in really slowly on him.
Which is part of the Sopranos season. I don't know what season that is, but remember where the whole thing with the Italians versus the Native Americans?
Yeah. And over Columbus Day, right?
Right, that's right. Yeah. That's the whole thing, the whole issue over Columbus Day. But
it's spawned by that commercial. There's something about that commercial, right?
Like Ralphie has the poster when he meets with him, and he's like, "This is your poster child. He wasn't really a Native American." Like,
yeah. Ralphie is awesome. Oh, I love The Sopranos.
Oh, so
that's good. That's a good mention. Well, how's your life? How's everything going in your world?
Everything's good. I wanted to get your advice on something.
Oh, please.
As a new homeowner, you may be able to speak to this. Now, well, to go back, as you know, historically, our dad would always sort of grease the palms of the garbage men, of the sanitation guys, to basically saying, like, especially around Christmas time, like drop an envelope and say maybe $100 a piece or something. Basically saying that there was an understanding, like, I give you this money changes hands and you take whatever I put out here.
Right.
This whole thing. Right. Yeah. And I was always fascinated by it because there was never a discussion. There was never any kind of dialogue. It was just some kind of ancient suburban understanding. Right?
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, it's great.
So
compact.
I've never done that. I've never done it with the sanitation guys, but I always think about it around the holidays, thinking it's a good opportunity, start afresh in the next new year and like just be able to put what you want on the curb. And now with COVID, I don't know how it is down there in VA, but in Pennsylvania, there's restrictions. Like you can't they'll let you put out your bins and then like an extra can or two. And that's it. They won't take anything else right now. And they cite COVID as being as the factor. So I'm thinking now, Helene and I are slowly renovating the house. We just got really nice floors put downstairs. It's been beautiful, right? But we have to purge. We have the two garages full of stuff. We have the basement. Kids are getting older. They don't need all their childhood stuff, high chairs and certain toys and all that kind of stuff. So we really have to get rid of stuff. And I'm thinking, how do I do that now in the spring, not during the holidays? Now, if I put an envelope out, there's no guarantee. There's a guarantee they're going to take the money.
Oh, yeah, that's a guarantee.
They're going to take the money.
Yeah. No,
but there's no guarantee I'm going to get anything in return. I feel like, I don't know, I feel a little silly. Maybe that understanding isn't universal. Maybe it's not a Pennsylvania thing. I think it is.
Maybe they think that you're just being, like you're just being friendly.
I think it is. But is it going to be strange? And the other thing is, too, as you know, and as a lot of people know, especially here in the U.S., it's not like the old days with the garbage men. They're not hanging off the tail, going slow in the neighborhood, jumping down and emptying the cans. These trucks are all automated. The guy stays in the cab. He goes through the neighborhood with his giant robot arm and dumps the things in. So there's no association with the guy. You could wave to him if you want to be friendly, but that's about it. That's a pretty much the extent of the the interpersonal relationships with the sanitation guys now. So I don't know what to do because I really do need to get rid of stuff. And maybe the other thing is, here's the other thing that you may not realize. They do a special collections thing. So let's say you have a mattress. They won't take that during regular collection. You could pay $20 though, and they'll come get it. And it's $20 per item, right? Boop, beep, boop, boop. You want everything, you got to pay each time you want.
So you got to shove things like into the mattress. You got to put
now that's
you got to like cut up a dresser with a chainsaw and put it in the mattress, and then reseal it with like a tarp.
That's a really smart idea. I never realized how valuable it is to get rid of stuff until we had a dumpster in the driveway a couple of weeks ago because we got the old floors ripped out and the new ones put in. And my hardwood floor guy came and purged his house. I had his old microwave in there. He had half his deck in it. It was like people, and my neighbors were like, "Can I get some shit in there?" Like people really
definitely
want to get rid of stuff.
Definitely. That I've noticed in my own neighborhood because it was my house was maybe in halfway amongst the everything being built around us. So they're just dumpsters everywhere.
Right.
And people are just, you just walk by, it's hysterical. Like there's just people, all sorts of shit in these dumpsters because they're obviously like building the houses, and people building houses don't care. So it's kind of like a wink and a nod thing. You see like a bike in there, or like boxes from clearly like, like a TV or so, like things that like would not be,
of course,
in these building materials. And I partook once. So I got rid of some things that were kind of big. Only did it once though.
Okay.
Because I kind of felt bad. It's funny you bring this up because I am obsessed with garbage, like getting rid of garbage and like getting rid of things and trying to. So I knew when I moved here, I had a bunch of boxes. I knew that I could just go throw the shit in the dumpsters. But instead, what I did was I just was like, I'm going to patiently whittle this thing of boxes down week by week, fit in what I can.
Right. Like
a puzzle, and then slowly have the satisfaction of having gotten rid of it. It's very similar to when I made the snow pile for no reason to see how long it will last. And so that's kind of how I play it. But I will say this. We have the garbage thing, the guy comes in and grabs it like you said.
Sure.
But I have what I would say is an intermediate relationship with this man. And I'm going to tell you why, because I'm out there often walking rush. So I see him sometimes. So he knows who I am, and I kind of know who he is. And I had a few weeks ago, not just a few weeks ago, I was walking and I had a poop bag in my hand, like a full poop bag. And he stops next to me, and there's no houses where I am.
Sure.
And he just points backwards.
No.
Like up and back.
Oh, this guy likes you.
As in to throw the bag in. And so I did that. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you got a good garbage guy.
And so I just threw it in and I waved and he waved and then he kept going.
Oh, this guy.
That happened. That really did happen.
That's unbelievable.
Not 3 weeks ago, perhaps.
That is unbelievable. The only other thing I've seen like that ever is I saw a guy, this was about a year ago probably. I saw a guy get out of the truck. He was done with the block, the cul-de-sac, and he was getting ready to turn onto the major throughway through the neighborhood, and something fell out of the back of the truck. It was like a rolled up paper towel. He got out, put his hazards on, got out, picked it up, put it in the truck, and got back in. Now, it might have been because everybody was at the bus stop watching.
Right. So you gotta,
so he has to put on a show. Like he has to make it look like he's doing his due diligence. But man, I'm envious of that guy, because my garbage men aren't that friendly. They also break down every other week on the cul-de-sac. They spilled transmission fluid in front of my friend's house 2 weeks ago because that giant thing that dumps the thing, they load it up and then it dumps back.
Right.
For some reason, the hydraulics always break on them. I mean, really, this happens every 2 or 3 weeks in front of somebody's house where the guy's sitting there for hours because he has to wait for his rescue. He has to wait for the tow truck to come. And he spilled transmission fluid all over my friend's, like in front of his house, and dragged it. And then they came with like sawdust and tried to clean it up with a power washer and stuff. It's stained for forever.
Yeah, it's never gonna. That's never
going anywhere.
No.
So I have to figure it out.
You'll figure it out. Talk to Dad and get advice. And
is the mid-year sort of payout acceptable? I don't.
Yeah,
I'm
can
sure
you
it's
jump
acceptable.
in mid-cycle? Like that's the question.
Are they gonna say our hands are tied because it's COVID? Can't do it.
Right. I don't know.
I'll keep you guys posted.
You also have to deal with I'm sure they're told not to take tips. I'm sure they've been told that for many decades.
I don't know.
So then you have to understand. I guess you have to also know. Are you dealing with a conservative sort of person or a more liberal sort of person? Not politically. I mean, in terms of their job. There are some people that were like, no, I'll do everything by the book. No. And there's some people that'd be like, I don't give a fuck. Do whatever you want.
I'm going to take whatever you give me.
So you also have to kind of put that in there. You don't know who you're dealing with here.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
now that I have the intermediate relationship with my guy, I feel like I don't really need anything from him right now, but I feel like I could start to broach that subject with him.
I think it would go well for you, for sure.
Yeah. Listen,
I might just take some garbage down there.
You're more than welcome. Please, my bin is rarely totally full. I have the big recycling thing too, and I love not breaking boxes down, just being like, hey,
just throw them in the hole.
Yeah, it's because unless you need the space. Because I'm so used to living in apartments where it's you have to send things down the tube, or if you live in really crazy places where if you don't rip your I used to rip my address things off of everything so no one would know which boxes were mine because people would be like, this box wasn't ripped.
Who did break this box down?
Dude, you have no. You probably do, but people are crazy.
I forgot about that. Yeah, this is a brave new world for you.
So yeah, well, okay.
How are you doing? This has been a crazy week for you.
Yeah, it's an interesting week. Yeah, I put up, as of we're recording this, I put up an interview with David Jaffe that's doing really well. It's a coincidence because we just did God of War, which was, he directed that game and designed it. So, but it was about a lot of different issues, and he kind of took over the interview as he does, and started interviewing me.
Did he really?
About halfway through. Yeah, about halfway through. That's when everyone really started to love it, I think, was when
I can't wait to listen to
he kind of took control of the interview and started asking me questions. But I'm going to do a show soon, and yeah, so it's been a big week. Like the Patreon is huge. It's blowing up. It is the biggest nerd culture like podcast network type Patreon ever.
That's insane.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just take a minute to think about that.
Yeah, I don't know what to do about that. We have to figure things out because we had these stretch goals. You put stretch goals so you slowly reach them. You hope to tantalize a person here and there as you grow. So at 10,500 patrons, we had Let's Plays. And then at 11,000, we had Sacred Symbols plus like a second episode of that. We assumed we would reach 10,500 and then figure out, all right, like let's figure out how we're going to produce these Let's Plays and we'll grow incrementally towards this next goal. But we've reached both goals essentially in like 2 days. So so no more stretch goals for the rest of the year. And now we have to figure out how we're going to roll these out. I assume it'll be done in the opposite direction where we'll put a second episode of Sacred Symbols Plus out first and then figure out the Let's Plays this summer.
Yeah.
But I'm not too worried about it because first of all, it's not going to be much more, no offense, but it's not going to be much more work for me. So we'll increase everyone's wages and stuff that work for us and produce and all of that kind of stuff. So everything will be commensurate as we move forward. For instance, like Dustin and I have our re-up, like he does like a 1-year contract with me every year. So so he has a lot of, I tweeted, I think I said it, or maybe I said it on Discord. I'm like, does anyone think Dustin realizes how much leverage he has over this company yet? I don't know if he noticed.
I think he knows. I think he's a smart kid. I think he's smarter than you give him credit for.
So I'm like, he's like Kevin Coelho, our guy at Kind of Funny. He's very similar to that. Like Kevin had extreme leverage over our company. We all knew it. Yeah. So it's pretty fun. So that's cool. So we have to figure out like the new production cycle and making sure it's really important to me that no one is overworked. It's my ideal that people that work for me full time work less than 40 hours a week, if possible. So, and getting that as low as possible with paying them more essentially over time. I want everyone to like work for me to like work as little as possible.
Quality of life, my friend.
Right. Yeah. Because I think the shows are better when we want to do them when people are. It's exciting to do KnockBack, right? But it's probably exciting too to get a paycheck for it as opposed to sitting, and like it's the same thing for everybody. Everyone feels that way. So it's like you got to. So I told you over text, like this week has been strange for me because I am very much in CEO mode, which I am usually not. In CEO mode, I don't run a very tight ship, so we're well oiled. But I'm not like in people's business. I don't talk to Ben at all, basically, unless something's wrong, and he just does what he does. Dustin does what he does. So it's interesting to jump back in every once in a while and be like, well, all right, now we need to And as I said to you, I don't have like a board or anything. So like I have, of course. So like, and maybe we would do that soon. Start to like bring people in as some sort of like advisory board when we get a little bigger. But in the meantime, like I have to make all of the decisions by myself just based on like my gut. So it's a lot.
That is a lot. You're wearing that CEO hat right now, temporarily at least until you figure it out. Cause you got stratospheric real quick. I mean, not that you haven't been already, but like, shot right up. And congratulations, dude. Enjoy it. Like I was telling you the other day, take time to enjoy it. Savor it. You got a lot of love out there. All you guys, I'm looking at all you guys and girls out there. And all the other guys and girls that watch Sacred Symbols, which is 90% of the people that aren't here, which I have a big problem with.
We're slowly getting them. I told you, like, our audio podcast remains steady and goes up a little bit every month, right?
Yeah, which is nice.
Everything on YouTube is just additive. These are just new people. So the
show's
bigger than ever.
It's so cool. Well,
yeah, so it's exciting. And I think it's totally... Well, first of all, if you say all that, and I appreciate it, you're really going to like the Jaffe interview. You should go listen to that.
Oh, I can't wait.
Because a lot of it is about that. And especially the second half when he just kind of asks me about my past and the company and where everything is and stuff like that. People found it quite interesting. But yeah, who knows if we'll stay this big. I always try to compare myself to I don't mean it in a braggadocious way, but like as a pro athlete, right?
Yeah.
You have your moment. You have your prime. You have your championship years. But even the Tom Bradys who are immune to time, seemingly, they will succumb at some point. Time, as is always said, is undefeated.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm like, I want to make the most of it. I want to make the smartest decisions. I want to treat people the best I can now. Because who knows? I mean, it would be surprising if we were always this big, right? Like maybe we'll get bigger at some point. Maybe we'll grow. But at some point, every sitcom goes away. Every everything goes, everything's sundown.
Sure. Sure. There's wisdom in that, thinking like that, for sure. But I think
so I want to enjoy it, and I'm trying to enjoy it.
Yeah,
I don't enjoy
the hell
anything.
out of it.
I don't enjoy
the hell out of it, my friend. You deserve it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you really do.
All right, Dig. Let's talk about the topic at hand today. We came up with this one, actually. We threw this one in the middle of our cycle here, and we're recording in the middle of the week because Dagan has important family plans when we would usually record this week. And this was one I've been kind of holding for a while. It's one of many, actually, of these random, ethereal conversations that we do. I wanted to talk about the woods and our experiences in the woods. Now, for us, they were very important. I imagine that for rural folk, they might not be as important if you grew up in, say, Nebraska or Oklahoma, where it's a little more flat, a little more barren, there's a lot of farmland, all of that. And if you grew up in an urban area, then I assume that they probably weren't very important for you. But for those of us in the suburbs, which are many, the woods play where nature meets civilization. The woods play an important role for us growing up. I hope they still do. I live in a pretty wooded area here, and it seems that is the case, which is nice. Kids are still playing outside, although it's the South. So come June, no one's going to be outside anymore. And so Dave, what do you think of this topic? I mean, what does this bring to mind for you? I wrote down so many notes because there's so many things to talk about. And what's fun about this for us is that many, or maybe some of these locations can be shared. Like we both had experiences maybe in some of these places.
Definitely.
Which is cool. So talk to me a little bit about what this kind of brings up in your mind when we talk about the woods.
Yeah, my curiosity is piqued. I really love this topic. This is one that you were bandying about a little bit, just off to the side, when we had to come up with our personal sort of retro, nostalgic, memory-esque topics. And I was, I would think about it like, oh, that's going to be an interesting one. And yeah, I love what you said about, well, first of all, it's a good thing I didn't go into this thinking that we were talking about wood.
Oh, yeah, like your favorite, pine.
Your favorite things made of wood, whatever.
Right.
I have to say,
Bats.
we talk about this. Right, exactly.
Yeah. Right, Lulu
I'm
sluggers.
fascinated by the potential of coming in to meet for a podcast, especially one like this, which we didn't talk about too much beforehand, and just being completely on different pages. Because how are we as professional podcasters going to retcon that? The one time we meet up and like, oh, we were doing God of War 3, I thought we were doing 2. Right. And then it's going to be really interesting to see how we maneuver out of that territory. There's a train wreck in that I'm just fascinated with. I'd rather see it on somebody else's podcast, to be honest with you. But I wonder how we would rise to that occasion.
Right. I was a little afraid of that happening. Yes. So
yes, because it could definitely potentially happen. And a bit, you have a busy week. You're busy with things. I'm busy with things. Who knows? Eventually, who knows? Maybe it will have it. But I love this topic because it's one that I think. Well, first of all, when you do a podcast like this for 3 or 4 years, like we have, and it's largely centered around our memories and our childhoods and our remembrances, I start to think like, Jesus, have I already told all my childhood stories that are worth telling, that are entertaining? But it turns out that I have a couple of good ones that I don't think I've ever brought up. One is particularly traumatic that took place in the woods, which I'll definitely be talking about. And the other thing is a lot of these things are stories that we may have never shared with each other. So I'll be privy to some new tales from you. I love hearing stories from people that in my family or close friends that I haven't heard before. I used to beg Dad to tell me stories about like the firehouse or growing up his childhood, especially because he was kind of he was always kind of not the most privy to talking about those things. So I would always try to coax those things out of him. Like, tell me a story about being a kid. Tell me about your first crush. Tell me something. So I might hear some new things from Kyle that I haven't heard from, before. And yeah, I mean, growing up in the Northeast, the woods were a big part of our surroundings. We grew up in the suburbs, and yeah, it's gonna, whether it's scouts or whether it's, being with friends, being with family, different parts of the Eastern United States, especially, I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a good one.
There's something about the woods that to me is very, well, it's I don't know, what would you call it? Like Neolithic or something. It's old. It feels old. It feels like you're drawn to this. Like this is where you're from in some way, or you understand this space. And I feel like a lot of people feel that. I don't feel like it's an unusual thing. People love being in the woods, and people love hunting and hiking and just, bird watching and doing whatever you do, botany and whatever. Like there's so mushrooms, and when you think about all the things, I'm not talking about doing mushrooms, but doing mushrooms in the woods is great. I'm talking about the mushrooms you find in the woods. You can also do mushrooms in the woods, and that's a whole other topic.
Completely acceptable.
So it's funny, like you think about some of the great shows, like we always talk about Game of Thrones, or I talk about The Last Kingdom, and a lot of it takes place in the woods. A lot of action in The Lord of the Rings in the woods, or The Witcher. People love those games, and the Elder Scrolls. There's always castles, Castlevania. I mean, I just think about how prescient it still is in our urban and suburban lives to want to be drawn back to nature, and how the woods represents it in such a distinct way. And I always love talking. It's so funny because the Black Forest in Germany, famous ancient forest, there are amazing pictures of it, and obviously pictures of other forests, but like when you're on the outside of it, and there's like a plain, and then you take a picture of the wood line, right? And it's just dark. And on the other side of the first layer of trees is something. I mean, it's more woods and more to discover and more to immerse yourself in. It's mystery, it's beauty, it's color. So like I've always been kind of drawn to it. And I mean, obviously, Dagan, the woods that I think about are woods that come into your life later, but it's the woods that just surrounded our house in Brookhaven, on Marie Court. And we had a fenced in area around our house that was, I think, almost an acre, something like that.
Yeah.
And our house was like, it's right near the water, so it's very sandy. And the house was just built there, and we had a pool in the backyard, and then we had just basically like an arc of woods around half of the house, and the other half was like along like another like country road. And I spent a lot of time back there, like a lot of time. And it's funny, like I can almost see and feel and taste like every inch gross of what what that terrain was like. I remember Dad used to have like a bunch of trailers in the back, and near like some of the trailers, and he had like stacked up old wood and stuff where like a bunch of thorns, and it felt like very end stage NES game. And then like on the other side, it was like more open wood against like the fence, and you'd walk there, and we would adventure and pretend and play. And I loved that area. I mean, do you have any remembrance of that, or any, because that's a little late for you? I mean, later.
Yeah, a little later.
You weren't maybe so much in play mode at that time per se, but I have memories of even playing back there with you. And I just spent an enormous amount of time in those woods. So like, and just feeling like what it was like to be in the pool and looking into the trees, and the way we had like a cool little deck that like wove around the house into like a more wooded area as it went to the side of the house and stuff. And a lot of nostalgia there for me. What do you remember about that? Yeah,
no, absolutely. Because talking about the house at Brookhaven, we moved there when I was 13. And where we lived previously, this really does play into my childhood with the woods and with forests in general a little bit, because where you were born and spent the first 3 years of your life, and where I was located from 1977 through 1987 in Medford on Long Island, was the suburbs, not too far away, only like 5, 6, 7 miles away or whatever from where we ended up in Brookhaven. But it was more built up. Particularly now, it was still Eastern Long Island of that era, still largely undeveloped, pine barrens and all that kind of stuff. But those neighborhoods, those developments in Medford were more congested. There were more houses. So the block we grew up on in Medford had 16 houses on it. And then if you think about the grid of that particular development, there were many blocks like that, and then a major thoroughfare sort of that ran through the neighborhood, and then on the other side of that, 2 or 3 more grids. So if you think of the sheer amount of house, and picture each house on like a quarter of an acre or maybe a little less. So pretty nestled together, pretty close knit, a lot of families, a lot of people, not too many woods proper, certainly not in the neighborhood. I think every house had like one tree planted on the curb, and then whatever landscaping you chose to do. So where we moved then in 87 to Brookhaven, much more rural. I mean, it was really the woods on the bay. Our development, our specific cul-de-sac was right across the street from a national wildlife preserve. And then on the other side of those woods was the marsh, and then whatever straights led to the bay. So, and everything, most of the houses there at that time had been there for many, many years, many decades. Old houses spread out, different types, whether it was an old Victorian house, a larger house, or an old cape. They were all, World War II era, post-World War II era houses there. They weren't doing, now Brookhaven is much different now. They've done a lot of construction since. But where our specific cul-de-sac, which was what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses?
Six houses.
That was new. That new construction in the late 80s was almost unheard of in that area at the time. And I think it was relatively controversial as well, because people didn't really want to build there. Picture no sidewalks, no street lights. It was very, very rural. You could only paint the houses certain colors. You could only have a certain look and aesthetic to your house. So now there's a lot more in Brookhaven Hamlet. But that was a very rural, it still is a very rural place. And it was an adjustment for us. And I remember it being really creepy how quiet it was at night, because you don't have those ambient noises of, we used to live outside of basically a major road that ran through Medford and the various developments. So you don't have all the ambient noises, the traffic noises, the families, the houses around, just the sheer amount of people, so much less. And it was a huge adjustment. And being in that neighborhood, especially the early years of the late 80s to early 90s, was new to us, even though we were from the suburbs. And again, we grew up just a stone's throw away from Brookhaven. I remember it being a lot of fun in a lot of ways. And those specifically, there's 2 memories that I have. I remember playing in the backyard with you, and it was kind of a nice formula the way Mom and Dad had it set up, because we were on an acre, relatively large front yard that eventually, they planted grass and everything like that. And the backyard was the pool and the deck area, and then behind that they left the woods alone. But the entire area, the entire acre was fenced in, as you say. And on the other side of that fence was a farm, our friend Kurt's farm. And so we had the woods already, so there was actually play area beyond the pool. Just in the yard, there was probably a half an acre of woods alone to play in. But then on the opposite side of Old Stump Road, which was the road our cul-de-sac was built off of, was that National Wildlife Preserve and all those woods. And the woods started out relatively, you could walk, and then it got more dense as you went back, until it ended up like brambles and thicket. And then beyond that thicket, which was, you couldn't traverse it after a certain point, it just got too thick. That's probably where the deer lived and stuff like that. Beyond that sort of untraversable space was the marsh, and then the bay, and then whatever straits were leading into the bay. And I used to go back there. I went through my sort of poetry writing, Miss Parry, we talk about a lot, Walt Whitman-esque stage of I would go back there after school. I had my army shoulder bag and my notebook, and I would sit under the trees and write poetries or short stories or whatever, or stuff for AP English or creative writing class. And that was a big routine of mine for a long time. I would go and I would be in the woods, and I would always try to go in deeper. I'm going to try to get past, there's got to be a way past this bramble and these thorns and everything, this thicket. And I never did. I never ended. It got so dense back there that you just couldn't, there was just no way a human being was going to get through without a machete type of thing. So I remember spending a lot of time back there. And then my other adventure was, and you might remember this, just up the road on that same side as the National Wildlife Preserve was the old chicken coops. Do you remember those?
I don't think so. Tell me more. So
there was so if you went up Old Stump Road, which is our road, or the side of our house kind of sided up to, probably about, an eighth of a mile or something, around Chapel Avenue, or whatever it was called there. My friend Chapel, Danny lived down there.
Yeah.
And just beyond that, on the same side of the road, was these old chicken coop buildings.
Oh yeah, I know exactly on the right side. Yeah, I know exactly
on the right hand side.
Yeah, right.
So on the same side as the marsh.
Sure.
And I was always fascinated with them. And in Brookhaven, talk about a neighborhood. Medford being built in the mid to late 70s. It was very. They were, I guess they were considered colonials, but they were very formulaic. Everything was kind of cookie cutter, very much the design and architecture and colors. They had the asbestos shingles, very unto that era. moving to a place like Brookhaven, which was actually historical. I mean, there were houses there hundreds of years old, and you had abandoned, we eventually ended up finding like an abandoned resort, and there was old fountains in the woods across from our high school and stuff.
Yeah.
But that was cool because it was like, wow, we get to play Indiana Jones a little bit. We get to explore. And those chicken coops are just like these long buildings, probably 100 years old. They were actually sinking into the earth. But they were these old abandoned buildings that seemingly didn't belong to anybody, that just remained there. And I would go exploring with my friend Tommy, who I talk about a lot on the podcast, who was also from Medford. So this was a new thing for him too, like being rural, walking the railroad tracks, being in the woods. This was all new stuff. And those chicken coops were like, we're going to get, when you're a kid, we're that age, 13, 14 years old, like that's where the drug dealers hang out. So we get that in our head, and we have our slingshots, and we go back there. And one time, if you went in, there was no windows. There was openings where, I guess chicken wire or maybe glass or plexiglass used to be, and then a door. And if you went in there, there wasn't really garbage in there, but like old oil drums, and it was overgrown, and it looked like people were throwing old fence sections in there and stuff like that. It was just cluttered with crap over the years. Not necessarily garbage, just crap. One day, we got in our heads that there was like some evil dudes in there, and that we were going to, we never went at night. We would go in there with our homemade slingshots and everything. And one time, must have been, in retrospect, it must have been teenagers hanging out in there or something. We were going through, and we were like doing our like little platoon, Full Metal Jacket, Red Dawn, creeping around with our slingshots, and a brick came flying out one of the windows. And we're like, oh shit! And there's no explanation for it. I'm sure in retrospect, again, it was probably just older kids hanging out in there smoking a joint or something. And I don't think we ever went back. But there was like a 2 or 3 week period where that was our thing every day. Tommy's mom would drive him over after school. We'd hang out 2 or 3 hours, stalk through the woods, explore, get these stories in our heads of like, there's drug dealers in there type of thing. And that was a whole thing that really spoke to that time period of 87, 88, 89 for me, because again, this was all new to us. There was all these places to explore, not even to say anything about the bay or the water being down there too, which is a whole nother element of like really finding yourself in this place that was so different than what you were used to in just a proper suburban neighborhood. This was much different.
Yeah. And I like that you brought up too, the, kind of the interesting, because Long Island obviously is on the water, so how the forest or the woods just butts right up to the water. Very distinct makeup, like you said, the thickets and the thorns and the pine barrens and then the reeds and all of that, but it's very distinct because it's like sandy and marshy.
Yeah.
And I remember walking back there in like the preserve when I was a little older, and just like you like eventually like step into like something, like you sink into the earth basically like a foot, and you're like, oh shit, and your shoes all wet. Yeah. Like, and yeah, trying to get as close to the water as possible basically was always a little bit of an adventure, and it's fun, man. It's fun to think about these things. And I love that you brought up also the stories like that you would tell yourself. It always felt very dangerous. Like you would find some old bottle or like a cigarette butt, and you'd think like, oh, what was going on here? But really it was nothing. It was like just people partying or being, getting away from things. It's unlikely things are sinister things. I remember our neighbor Mike, who is the older brother of my friend Tim, he would tell us, I remember him telling us stories about like the bad things that would happen in the woods or whatever. Like, a girl got hit by the train here, like where the train goes down by, I guess like Jim's Deli, or not even Jim's Deli, but what is that road called? I don't even know.
I know the little side
that outlet road. Yeah,
that runs along like the tracks.
Right.
Oh, I wish I knew.
I can't remember, but I remember like there was like big piles of dirt and debris and stuff, and you'd be like, yeah, there's like a body in there, and so like there was always a sense of danger. But like you said, it was like I don't think I ever had like a confrontation or like anything like that. You always expected it, and you were afraid of that, which is funny because I was too. And then I just have to also bring up, and I circle this in my notes because I must say the part of the Long Island experience in the woods is poison ivy. If you are not immune to it, which some people are, it is a fact of absolute life on Long Island. I used to get poison ivy all the time.
As a kid, did you really?
Yeah, every year I would get poison ivy. Dad knows well because first of all, we had a pool, which is great for poison ivy. Yeah. So you just like dive in and whatever. But also I would like take oatmeal baths and everything. Like I just couldn't help myself from getting this stuff like, because I was just all over the place. Did you have an experience with poison ivy? Because some people don't get it or don't get it badly, and then some people get it really badly, and I'm one of those people.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I didn't get it. And I knew where it was. Crazy. Specifically, if you remember, like, we had the 2 garage doors, and then Dad built that little walkway on the side of the house that led around back eventually to the pool and the deck. If you kept going towards, I guess that was Ed and Rose's house. Not Ed and Rose.
Ed and Ann.
Ann's house.
Right.
If you kept going along the fence towards their house, there was a lot of poison ivy in there. And, just playing ball and skating and everything over the years in the driveway and stuff, things would end up in there. And people would actually ask me to go in and get things because I just didn't get it. It just didn't affect me. I don't know if I was just getting lucky and not hitting it, but I doubt that was the thing. Now I get it terrible. I mean, I feel like I can't be near poison ivy without getting it. Every year, inevitably, I get it, like in the beginning of spring when we start landscaping and weeding and everything, and then the end of the summer. And it's not like we have a ton back here, but I feel like if I'm anywhere near it, I'm going to get it. But as a kid, for some reason, I just was immune to it. Isn't that strange? My mother-in-law swears that she's immune to it too. Actually, now, today, like she'll say, "I'll pull it out. Just give me the garbage bag. I'll pull it out, whatever." And I'm like, "You're going to get." This poor woman's going to get poison ivy. For some reason, she thinks she's immune to it. But
because I think some people, yeah, she might not be, but I think some people are, because I think, especially with landscaping, like coastal landscaping, some people are immune to it and just can go in and like,
you build up a tolerance.
You have to you have to get rid of it. You're really not supposed to do this, I think, but I think some people do it if they do have the immunity, or they do it in the middle of nowhere, is burning it, getting rid of it. But you can get it in your lungs. Like there's no real good. I think it can kill you if you get it in. Like you can breathe it in. But I think there's like no good way to get rid of it. So it's funny. Yeah, that's so interesting. I wonder if it's because of your background as a Boy Scout too, where because I was fucking know anything. I was going running through the woods like an idiot.
Yeah. Not
really looking around for anything. Even when poison ivy was pointed out to me over and over and over again by people like Dad and whoever it was, I'd be like, and then I'd think it was the wrong thing, and then I would, or I was like weeding people's yards for money, and you would just get it in all sorts of different ways.
Oh, it was everywhere. So it was everywhere.
Yeah, that was totally a fact of life. But I did want to bring up Boy Scouts for you. I wasn't in Boy Scouts, and this would bring you back really before I was even born or around there. But what's your experience, obviously, in the woods with Boy Scouts, which must be substantial? You've obviously told the story, very funny story of the guy that would like stalk all of you, which is great. But I'm sure you have many stories from being a Boy Scout in the woods. Yeah,
that was I was just thinking about him the other day, because I know I talked about that before. Billy, I won't mention his last name, we called him Rambo, where I just think of it in terms of having kids that age now, where it was like back then in the 80s, of course I was a lifelong scout. I started as a cub and worked my way up through Weeblos and then Boy Scouts, and Mom and Dad were always very insistent. I've talked about that on the show before, where they were very insistent that I be involved in it. It was very, Dad was a scout. For some reason, they really were, absolutely gung-ho about me being a scout. It was no questions asked, no bones about it. You're doing this type of thing. And ultimately, I did enjoy it. And camping in the woods was a big part of what I enjoyed. I didn't enjoy going to the meetings every Wednesday night, especially I've talked about when I started skateboarding. I just wanted to be doing that. And it was sort of an unacceptable break in my routine. But eventually I did definitely learn to enjoy it. The funny thing about Scouts in general with camping was that we did it all year round. So we had a spring camp out, we had a winter camp out called the Polar Bear, which could be at one of several campsites on Long Island, usually on Long Island, sometimes up into upstate New York or the boroughs, but usually it took place on Long Island. And those were hard. Those polar bears were hard because sometimes it would get below freezing at night. And you had crappy sleeping bags and you were just in a tent and whatever food your parents supplied you with and all that kind of stuff. But really my biggest probably remembrance of the woods proper with Boy Scouts was summer camp, because that was an opportunity to be away from home for a week, usually just a little more than a week, and just be living in the woods for that long stretch of time by itself. And usually what happened, and I think I only did it probably 3 times, 3 different summers. And it was at a scout camp called Baiting Hollow, which was in Calverton, out east on the North Shore near Riverhead, for those of you who know Long Island. Very, very rural setting, east of even where we were at on Long Island, pretty far out east, not too far from the Hamptons. and on the North Shore. Bathing Hollow was, I don't know how many acres it was. It was a huge expanse, had a beautiful freshwater lake. And then part of the camp was bordered on a beach that was right on the Long Island Sound, again, on the North Shore. So it was really a pretty place. And then it had all, it was kind of a proper adventure. School would be out, whatever, this was probably in June, and you would go to, maybe it was July, and you would go to the camp, and it was just being, it was my only camp experience, because we weren't camp kids. We didn't grow up going to summer camp proper and all that kind of stuff. So for me, it was that week, usually a week or 8-day long scouting trip with your troop, and you would go, and you would basically live in a campsite. Each troop would have a campsite, and you would live in a tent. But the tents had wood frames, picture it, right? Wood frames and like wood decked floors, so a little elevated, and then there would be canvas tents on top. So it was sort of a hybrid between a cabin and a tent. And then it would be 2 boys to each. I think it was 2 or 4 boys to each, maybe depending on the size, to each tent. And then you would have really makeshift wooden bunks. And then there was like a mess hall and a general store where you could buy candy, and maybe they had a little supply of magazines, or you could buy snacks and drinks and a toothbrush. That was kind of like the meeting spot, the general store. And then there were trails, and you could just do all the camping things. Archery, you go out on a canoe on the lake, you go fishing on the lake. And then there was different stations, different buildings if you wanted to do basket weaving or make a leather wallet and all the lame stuff. We would try to basically spend all our time on the lake, or doing archery or something that was exciting. Maybe you could go on the beach for the night, and then there was a giant communal campfire area where they would tell ghost stories at night. All the troops would gather. It was a lot of fun. I actually really enjoyed it as an older scout, probably, 13, 14, 15 years old. And we had a lot of fun. I had a very close friend. I had a bunch of close friends in the troop eventually. My friend Mike's dad was the head troop master, my friend Mike. His dad was like the head troop master. It was Mr. McCarthy, and they lived at Brookhaven Hamlet too. And we had a very interesting relationship, because I was kind of like, I eventually fell into this place where I was kind of like the class clown in Troop 4. And I would bust Mr. McCarthy's balls. He loved me like a son, but it was a very sort of jokingly adversarial relationship that we had, where I would bust his chops and he would call me a skate rat and all this kind of stuff. And it was very close. And I hung out with Mike a lot because Mike this is an important part of the story, actually. Mike had a vert ramp in his backyard, a skate ramp, a 10-foot ramp. I mean, a beautiful multi-$1,000, probably tens of thousands of dollars ramp with, skate light. And it was beautifully done, professionally built. And Mike was a skater, so I spent a lot of time with him in general anyway. So I got to know that family really well. And then Mike's older brother, JJ, was like a senior scout. He would eventually become a life scout and sort of age out of the troop. But it was Mr. McCarthy, JJ, and Mike. And my biggest story, which I don't even know if you know this story, Kyle. So might have been my last year, or maybe it might have been my last year at Bathing Hollow for the summer, or it might have been when I was 14. And it was towards the end of the trip. Maybe it was like 1 or 2 days to go. We were almost done with the camp that year. And we were in the mess hall eating breakfast. And we got done with breakfast, normal day. We were going to go set about our business, do what we got to do. Sometimes we would compete against other troops in certain categories. Like the patrols would go out and compete in knot tying, or they would compete in a tote and ship thing, or they would compete in some sort of botany task or whatever. And then sometimes you had free time to do what you wanted to do with who you wanted to do. We'll go out on the canoe, we'll go do some archery. And we were going to go do what we had to do. And I was leaving the mess hall. And it was one of those things, dude, where it happened faster than I can even remember how it happened. My finger. So if you picture like an old school mess hall, it has those screen doors that kind of swing both ways. They swing in and out. My finger got caught in there somehow.
Oh.
And I basically was like, holy shit. And when I took it out, the tip of my finger was hanging off. Like the top inch of my middle finger, you could see the scar. Now, I don't think the bone was involved. It was just high enough where I pulled it out and it was obviously bleeding and it was crooked. And I was like, oh shit. Like, I panicked. I like freaked out. I went into shock, right? And Mr. McCarthy, I'll never forget this as long as I live. I have to remember, I was always busting this guy's balls. I ran over to him and the other scoutmasters still sitting at their table, finishing up breakfast, their coffee, whatever they were doing. And I was like, Mr. McCarthy, look, like my finger, what the, I was freaking out. And he was like, cut the shit, Moriarty. Like, what are you doing? Like, it was a total boy who cried wolf moment. And it literally felt like an eternity until where he's like, oh shit, like, you're not kidding. It was like, it was definitely a couple of beats, like a couple of times of like, cut, why are you busting my balls? I'm trying to drink my coffee type thing. Then when he realized what it was, I don't even remember anything after that. I just remember sitting in some local hospital. I don't even know what hospital it could have been out there. And sitting on like the, the examining table and the doctor fixing my, giving me a shot and fixing my finger, and straightening my finger and getting stitches, and dad being there. Wherever dad was, he had to shoot out from wherever he was, and going home after that. Like, that trip got cut short because of that injury. But that was, it's so unfortunate because there were so many great memories of that place, but that'll always be the preeminent memory now of like almost losing the tip of my fucking finger.
Yeah, that's scary. Yeah, you would have had like Elizabeth in BioShock Infinite would have put a little thimble on the end of your finger.
Dude, and you know what? I think of that group of guys in my troop, like that motley crew of people. The fact that no one lost a limb or a finger or a toe with the axes and the saws and all the kind of shit we did, and that was the injury. It was like me, of all people. We had Billy, we had Rambo, we had like this guy Dave, who was a wild man. Like, people would just go out and do whatever the hell they wanted. It was like,
yeah, and you had like bows and arrows and knives and all. It was
22s, like rifle
guns,
ranges and stuff like that. Outdoor, like, I just feel like, I was gonna say earlier, like, I feel like it's so different now. Like, certainly there would not be a boy who we got to the campsite and would get lost for 2 or 3 days and just do his own thing out of the purview of the scoutmasters. Like, that would not go down anymore. That's what Billy did. He just basically, he was a survivalist. He lived off the land. We'd be like, where the hell is Billy? And we'd see him 3 days later. He'd pop up in the mess hall because he was hungry. Like, that's it. It's like, that would never fly today. So I feel, in a way, it's so funny to think back.
Gotta find him.
To those times, because it just, that would just not be kosher now, ever.
I was going to ask you, I mean, it kind of splits off of this because you were talking about play in the 80s and 90s and play today. And this comes up on our show often, but like, how does your son interact with the world? Like, if you put him in the woods, is he going to be a boy about it? Or is he like, I don't have a good read on him because I'm not around him very often, but he seems much more like me than you. And I don't know if that, I mean, I had my woods, I liked being outside, but I think I was much more into being inside than you were. Generally, you like to go skate. That was always like a supplement to your activity. You'd rather go to the arcade even than play inside the house. I'd rather just like play and like not go outside at all for most of my life. I kind of get that vibe from your son, but not as bad as me.
Yeah.
And I embrace that. But like, how does he play? Like, is he a little boy about like playing war and going into the woods and throwing grenades and doing all that? Because I don't have a read on children today either, so it's hard for me to figure it out.
Yeah, and it does feel different today too, just in general, not only applying to Graydon, but just in general. No, it's a great question. There is a large part of his personality that is a lot like his Uncle Kyle, for sure. Like, he loves comfort. He loves to come home, get in his jammies, play a video game or watch YouTube.
Does he carry his comforter around the house?
He straps his magnet to his head, the whole 9 yards.
It's still a joke, by the way, in the family that like I would basically just walk around in my underwear and just take my comforter with me, like from couch to couch, like, or like if I go to the kitchen, I like be like draped in my comforter at the table, like eating, and then I'd like go lay on the couch in the comforter, and I'd just be in my underwear.
Funny,
like through high school.
You did, yeah. I was gonna say you, all the way through school. I would say K through 12. That was your MO. It is so funny, dude, because he does have that. He does do the blanket thing. And sometimes it is the covers from his actual bed too, which is really funny.
I remember you walking in once to me, like when I was in high school, and I was like probably sleeping at like 1 PM or something, and you just came in and just ripped the comforter off me, and I was just like, it was just like my body, like my just spread out, like my.
That's awesome. I
do have a fond memory of that. But
I love that, dude. I love those.
Yeah,
kind
but so
memories.
Like, is he what's he does? So he does have a little bit of
me
and him, but what about his outdoorsiness and all of that? Is
he loves it. The thing about Graydon is this, and this is my biggest bone of contention. It's a very timely conversation for us to have because this is something going on with me and Helene versus the kids right now too. Specifically, Graydon is that I was so different than him when I was a kid, because I really, listen, I love to wake up Saturday morning, big bowl of cereal, watch cartoons. I loved, like, even as an older kid, coming home and watching like the Disney afternoon block, like DuckTales and Darkwing. Like, I was all in for TV. I was all in for video games, all the way from the inception of the Atari. I loved arcades, obviously. I loved all that stuff. But my personality was very much like, okay, soak all that stuff in for a little while, and then it fired me up to want to go outside and do things. Whether it was like I wanted to play baseball with my friends, or play Transformers with Tommy, or start a whole new G.I. Joe action figure campaign with him, or go swimming, or just pal around with John, whatever it was, like I would get fired up to go do things. I feel like if you put Graydon, I feel like he would. If you put him in front of the video games for 3 days and said, here, have had it for 72 hours, he would have at it for 72 hours. That wasn't me. So it's like me trying to understand and get into the inner workings, the sort of cogs of your kid's mind. But here's the thing about Graydon that's interesting. He loves nature and being outside. Like, he's a very flip over the stone and look at the bugs underneath type of kid. He's not squeamish. He loves hiking. We're lucky to be in a really beautiful place in Bucks County where there's really beautiful spots. We have like Peace Valley, and we have Ringing Rocks, and we have the different lakes and caves and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of places to go, and he loves that. He loves an adventure. But with Graydon, and a lot of you parents out there may be able to speak to this, I don't think this is uncommon. You have to sort of get him out there, and then he doesn't want to come back in. Like he's just starting fishing in our pond, which is in walking distance, with a friend of his whose family is like really like outdoorsy, like they're hunters and fishermen and stuff like that. And Graydon's just starting. His friend Carter is teaching him how to fish because he's never really been fishing before. And he was just telling me this morning, like, oh, I'm going to meet Carter after school. We're going to go up to the pond and go fishing. So, but you have to get him out there, and then it's hard to get him back in. So he has both. He's interesting in that he has both dimensions to his personality. Like, he has that outdoorsy, I don't want to come in type. And then he has that, he has that mindset of like, I'm just fucking around with YouTube and Switch today, So you have to prompt him. He's, and maybe it's his age. Maybe he'll stay like this for a little while. I don't know, where it's like, you got to kind of push him out the door, and then it's hard to get him back in. That's what I'm finding with him right now. Lily is a little better because her MO is hanging out with her friends. So it's whatever her friends are doing. If her friends are walking around outside, or they're going to walk up to Wawa or go to the playground and hang out, as long as she's with her friends, that's all that matters. That's what her her life centers around. So it's easier to get her out and about and not
her best
be so
friend
cloistered.
Also lives down the street, right? Which is nice.
Yeah, her best friend's three houses down.
That's a great advantage.
And then everybody's close by. She has like a posse of 6 or 7 that are super close, and they're all, relatively close by. So, yeah. So it's, it's interesting that, with Graydon, it's like, as a parent, I'm going through those doldrums now of like, dude, like, if I say you could play video games for a couple hours, sick. Like, that's awesome. Like, play video games for a couple hours. Let me see you put it down of your own accord and go do something. Because the reason we have to limit it with him is because he'll just keep doing it. It'll be Monday morning and he wouldn't even stop to eat. I feel like, that type of thing. Where it's like, just show me, and especially with Helene, show her that you could put it down, that you have the discipline of like, all right, I'm going to go do something else. Then come back. Come back to it. This way it's not a battle, you know what I mean? But he's just not, it's not clicking yet with him. Right. I think about you a lot with this conversation. I'm like, well, what Colin think of this? Because I have to limit it, because it's like, that's all you want to do. It's like, remember, like, you like outside. Remember, you like being on your bike. You like being in nature. Like, go do that.
Yeah. It's very important to kind of have balance in your life. I don't have very much balance in my leisure activities, but I have life work balance better than ever, which I think is not something a kid has to worry about. So in that,
that's huge.
So when you're younger, it's about having a more diverse and inquisitive set of hobbies or whatever that hopefully cross you over into various things, so you have at least a little bit of a taste. And then if he thinks that he'll know better, that it's like, I've tried, because that's kind of how I feel now, where it's like, well, I've done all this stuff. I mean, I've done many things. I'm 36 years old. I want to sit in front of a TV and play video games. Been around the world. I've done exciting things, and like, it's like, cool. I appreciate that people like doing that, but now I'm old enough to know that if I never left the U.S. again, for instance, I'd be perfectly fine.
You always say that.
So, you know, like, but that's because I'm a creature of comfort, and it's not, your son definitely is as well. I mean, I can identify that from a mile away. I'm like, I know, I have like a symbiosis with him where I'm like, I know,
yeah,
you know, and remember, and I'll be interested to see how you deal with him in high school, because that's when Dad and I started to really get into conflict with. But the difference is that you are into everything that he likes.
Yes.
So it's different. Dad didn't understand. I said, and I've said this many times on the show, so I don't mean to be redundant, that Dad basically apologized to me in so many words when I graduated college for busting my balls so much. Because he's like, wow, like you really did know what you were doing. You know, I told the story about how I remember when his 486 PC broke down and it just happened to break when I was using it. He blamed me for it.
Yes.
And I'm like, but I didn't do anything. You don't even know what you're talking about. You know, like your computer just crashed. Like, and it was years later that he started to acknowledge all this stuff and started to talk about how cool it was that my keyboard in my room on my Sony Vaio like had no letters on it or whatever, you know? So it's going to bring you guys into some sort of, and if not conflict, some sort of dance. And you're gonna have to,
I think so.
You're gonna have to figure it out.
It's interesting that you say that, because I think I am sort of sympathetic or empathetic to him, because I think sometimes he does think. With Helene, it's a little different. She's not a gamer. She doesn't have those nerd-centric qualities or anything like that. But for me, I think he thinks of like, why are you busting my chops? Like this, you love this stuff too, you know? And I'll tell him, because you gotta find a balance. You can't just do this one thing all day. And a lot of it too is appeasing Mom. You know, it's like, play the game, dude. Like, show her, like, you're going to put this down. Like, you start at like 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning. You're done at 11. You go outside for a little while, you know, shoot hoops, go fishing with Carter, you know, ride bikes, whatever. And then when you come back, you hit it, you know, you hit the video games. Or just, I tell him, you know, and you tell me if you agree with this strategy, actually. I tell him, hit the video games at night. Wait till after dinner, wait till the evening time. Video games are perfect for the nighttime because you already got a day in. You already did some things that you had to do. You spent time with family. You got some fresh air. You played with the kids in the neighborhood. You had a play date with your friends. You went to their house. They came over. You went to town with us and had dinner. Whatever you're going to do. Then you come home and you cap your day with the video games because all the other responsibilities are out of the way. Then this thing that you really enjoy a lot, one of your favorite things, you just you could bask in that for a while. You know, it's like delay your gratification and, you know, do it at night. That's what I always did. I mean, I wasted so much time, even in high school, playing Nintendo and Super Nintendo when I should have been studying. It comforted me. It's interesting because he has so much of his Uncle Colin's qualities that sometimes I'll call him Colin. Like, that's how much he reminds me of you at his age. It's been all the way from like 3 or 4 all the way through 10 and 11 now, where it's like, yeah, you're very much like your uncle in that way. You know, he has his own dimensions too, but he does have a lot of that sort of thing where it's like, I just think I almost think like he's going to go, if he doesn't go into animation, he's going to go into video games in some capacity. Like, it's just, it really speaks to him. You know, that's really what he really enjoys it, you know?
Yeah, it's great. Maybe we'll all be able to work together
now that would be
on
cool.
A game in the future. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Cool. Yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of chronicle that and see what happens. I think parents, and again, you're different, but I think, because I see this with Dana, who just doesn't understand video games at all and refuses to try to understand them, where it's like, this is more positive than you think. I understand that a lot of it is Fortnite or whatever, like,
yeah, sure.
It's fun. They're fun games, but I understand a lot of it is Apex Legends or Call of Duty, where there's not much to it, but many people are playing very deep games that require thought and analysis, and there are games with more of a word count than many books, many big books, many popular books. And I wish at the same time parents realize it's like, okay, your kids are probably not playing like Fallout 4 or The Witcher or something, but maybe they are. And if they are, they're basically reading books while they're playing the game.
That's a great point.
You know, they're getting a story, they're learning vocabulary. How many times do I have to say how many vocabulary words I've learned from video games?
Sure.
I have learned many things from video games. I learned everything my whole basis of like Roman and Greek mythology and all of that comes from summons in Final Fantasy games. It's funny how you just get little seeds set in, you know, you oftentimes when I play games, I realize later on, I'm like, oh shit, that inspired this, or this is inspired by that. So that's the one thing that frustrates me with parents sometimes is like, just understand that there's more to this than what you think, and that it's not that bad. Like if you're, in my opinion, if your kid is sitting in his bed playing The Witcher at night, what's different than that? Like, I understand, so it's different where you're not reading, you're not learning the vocabulary and all of that. I get it, but you're experiencing a story. It would be like picking up Harry Potter or The Witcher, which is a book series. You know, that to me always confused me, where I'm like, it's not that bad.
No, I agree with you on that. I mean, think about it like this, okay? And this might be a whole topic, you know, a podcast topic unto itself, but think about it along these lines. How many parents would be bummed if their kids were film buffs, you know, if they were film connoisseurs, where it's like a video game is just as valid, at least now, just as valid as a film, in that you have voice talent, art direction, writing, editing, and then I would argue even you would take it a step further to go into all the programming stuff and the intelligence and the publishing and the PR people. Everything that surrounds a video game is just as valid as a film. I mean, it's a work of art through and through, right? Just like a film. So, and there is so much that, and it also, on the other end of what you're saying too, is like, it also engages a kid's imagination like a book, like a film. It's another form of media to consume that could be just as constructive as a book or a film or a TV show, a TV series, a Netflix series, whatever. So yeah, there is a lot of sort of like there's some kind of panic around video games that really hasn't gone away since the inception of home video gaming, I would say. Or maybe you could even argue D&D or arcade gaming, which is really, it's just not thoughtful. I feel like if people would just stop, it almost becomes a trope or like a cliche. It's like if you just stop and think about it, you know what I mean? It would make more sense to you as a semi-intelligent human being or as a parent. Like, this is just another thing for your kids to engage with. And it's a completely, not only that, but it's a completely valid form of entertainment and a completely valid industry that, and a growing industry, a huge industry and a growing industry in our country and in many places in the world, where it's like they could do this for a living. You know, they could make games, they could be involved in a development studio or a publishing studio or talk about games or create their own indie games, whatever. So you have to give your kids some rope. You know what I mean? Like, you have to give them a modicum of freedom in order to engage in the things they like. Balance, I can understand, you know, arguing for balance, just so they have a nice breadth of variety in their life. But besides that, it's like, it's, you know, it's something that I struggle with as a parent, just because I want to see, you know, part of it is having a non-gamer spouse. So it's trying to get her on the same page. And she's relatively open-minded. That's fine. But, you know, also it's like just trying to get Graydon to be multidimensional and say, this thing's going to be here. You know what I mean? Like, I know you dig it. Like, it's sweet. Like, I dig it too. Like, let's do all these things. And then let's, if this is the most important thing, let's make this let's make this dessert. You know what I mean? Let's go do this tonight together. And I try to be involved with the stuff he's playing too, even if I'm not interested in it, you know, where it's like, so he feels like, you know, like, we didn't grow up with parents like that. The baby boomers were not like that. You know what I mean? They threw us from infancy. They threw us in the playroom, gave us our toys. They weren't sitting on the floor playing with us. That's not what that generation did. You know, the Gen Xers were probably the first generation to actually sit down and play with their kids and be engaged with them. So there's a positive in that. So, definitely. You know, it's cool. It's nice to be able to talk about that with you a little bit, because you're the uncle. You know, you should be privy to these conversations.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it brings us back to our topic too, because it just allows. It's like what you said. Like, there's no problem making that choice once you have the breadth of knowledge in order to make an educated or informed choice. And part of that is getting outside and getting in there. And I love that you brought up the point of being inspired to go play. You know, how many times did I play Contra or something and like want to go just shoot things in the woods and all of that, or played, you know, go take my sword into the woods and play Dragon Warrior and just beat the shit out of trees basically with plastic swords. So it definitely comes back to that. I since we're talking about Long Island, I do have to give a shout out to just a couple of other things though. One thing is that when we moved to Woodland Avenue, and that was where I lived in high school, my best friend Mike Pope lived right across the street, and across his house, there's like huge woods that leads up to a farm. It's actually the same complex of woods that goes all the way around to the bay, back to where we used to live. There's like a road that cuts through it, which is Beaver Dam, but that's basically it. And we used to go back in there, and what's funny about it is that Mike is very much like me, where he didn't want to grow up. Like he's very much like us. Like he still doesn't want to grow up, and he didn't want to grow up.
I get that.
He loved anime and samurai shit and all, like all video N64 and everything. And so we actually, and I think I said this on the show, so I'm sorry if I haven't, but we actually had these PVC pipes that we used to fight with, like through high school. And he had like I don't know what he did to it, but it was like this, it was dope. It was like a PVC pipe that was just slightly bent, so it looked like a katana. And it was like tempered in some way, because I guess first of all, it's powerful. His dad was an electrician, so he had like all of this stuff around the house, and it seemed like it was just tempered, like you couldn't break it. And then I had a PVC pipe that was basically like a bow staff, and we used to just fight with it. But we were way too old to be doing this.
Oh, of course.
And then we would, especially like when episode 1 came out and everything, and like Darth Maul, we were just, and I was like 14 or 15 years old. But then like we would go into the woods and we would just walk around for many hours back there, maybe take a backpack and like our weapons. And we were like in 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade doing this.
It's awesome.
And not like fight, like we would just put the thing on my back and like my backpack, and we would be smoking weed or something and hanging out. But he was very much into the Lord of the Rings. He's very much into like, The Witcher and Game of Thrones and all of that stuff, and very much into fantasy and dragons. And so I always think about him because we used to love being in those woods back there. And there was it was not named this by me. It was named by other generations. So hopefully it's still named this. There's a hill back there called Pork Chop Hill. And that's where everyone used to go sledding. I don't know if you remember that. That was like one of the great sledding spots, was in Brookhaven, was in the woods near Dad's house.
I'm trying to think of where that is.
Parallel to South Country Road. Like you would go down this hill, and it was an amazing.
Yes, I think I know where you're talking about.
It was an amazing sledding back there. And the only other great sledding place was in front of the high school, but to do it, you would have to go across the street. So it was so funny. Like, people used to do this. I mean, I'm sure I remember doing this, and I think I might have done it with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where if you go look at Google Maps or whatever, Bellport High School where we went, it's on a hill.
Yes.
And in the front, there's like a hill that, grassy hill that goes down, and then it goes into a street, and then there's like woods across the street, and people used to sled all the way down the hill, fly across the street, and then into the woods. And I remember Mom and Dad being like, "Whoa," like aghast that people were, especially Dad, that people were aghast. But I used to do it all. I used to do it all the time.
Oh, such a good hill.
Yeah,
irresistible.
Awesome. And people used to stand like on the, like kind of give you the go. I remember people like giving you the go ahead, like no cars are coming. Because you get about 5 seconds, and then, and sometimes I do remember too, like a boarding was like, wait.
Oh yeah, of course.
And then someone like falls off the sled to like stop from going, like
a lot of trust involved in that.
Yeah.
Dude, so funny. And that's that hill. If you sled down that hill into the, across the major road into the woods, that was one way, or you could do sideways into the road that led into the parking lot, which was a little less dangerous, but there was a high curb on the other side. But if you did,
that would like curve you around like it was like a bobsled.
Yeah, that's right. You could curve around if you were athletic enough to do that, to steer it. But if you went across the woods proper down that hill, that's where we found that old forgotten resort. And the whole thing, we were young skateboarders. We had been skateboarding for 2 or 3 years at the time. And we were watching Animal Chin or some other thing, and we were like, maybe we could find something in the woods, And we did. I mean, not that it was skatable, but we found these old concrete fountains with like these beautiful concrete statues of women, and then we found a huge pool. Now, the pool didn't have any curved transitions. It was a square concrete pool, an early pool. It turned out to be a resort from like the early 1900s that was like, abandoned. It was on somebody's property. But it was like that woods, that sledding hill, if you just kept going, another, I don't even know, 25 paces or something. That's where that all started. And we unburied all this crazy stuff. That was the cool thing about Brookhaven, is that it was historical. And there were old things. There were dwellings and things that dated back, even stores and stuff that dated back like 100, 200 years, 150 years maybe. And that was, in fact, that house, you remember the house across from Little Brookhaven Library where Dana always worked, our sister Dana always worked, there was a house where they filmed the old, not the remake, obviously, the old original Great Gatsby, they filmed some of the exteriors there. It was an old, beautiful Victorian house, a big man. I guess it was a mansion, really. They filmed some of the exteriors of the Gatsby there, which I guess was God, who was in that one?
I'll look for you.
Yeah, it was, gosh, I can't remember now. Mia Farrow might have been in that version, actually. And so, it was a historical place, a beautiful place. And the woods were such a big part of that, dude. But I just remember it being like, it's so funny to think of that we grew up so close to that place. And in fact, it's important to say, I almost forgot about this. Our elementary school, Brookhaven Elementary, was in Brookhaven Hamlet, where we would eventually move. But so it's not like we didn't know it was there. We always were, and we had friends that grew up there and stuff like that. So actually moving there, though, was such a life change. It was like living in that rural area as opposed to growing up in Medford, where it was so much more congested and, just a proper suburban neighborhood rather than a rural space, was so interesting. And, thinking back to being an elementary school kid, K through 3, and being in Little Brookhaven Elementary and Brookhaven Hamlet, I never thought I would move to Brookhaven. You know what I mean? Like, I never in a million years thought we would move there, because Mom and Dad were looking at like moving, like, if you know Long Island, like they were looking at like Comac and those areas in the center of the island, where it was like, they could have moved to the center of Long Island, Nassau County. They were looking upstate in Orange County, because Dad could only go so far. He had to be in a certain radius to still, work in the firehouse. So, like, I guess Southern Connecticut was fair territory. But just thinking about, like, the fact that we could have moved to, like, the center of Long Island, like the Huntington area where they were looking. So to end up in Brookhaven Hamlet was really almost prescient, because it was like eventually we would come to really know that place. Yeah,
it's vital. And to answer your question, 1974, Great Gatsby, Mia Farrow, Robert Redford,
of course,
Sam Waterston.
Oh, interesting.
Two other things I wanted to bring up quick, Dave.
Yeah.
About Long Island was when I got into high school, as you know, and some of the audience knows, I got into paintball. And we used to go into the woods and play paintball all the time, and specifically the woods behind Vern Critz, which is an elementary school on Long Island. Like we came from, I don't know what it is now, but in our district, there were 3 elementary schools. We went to Brookhaven, but there was another one, a sister one. They all fed into the same schools later on, middle school and high school. But Vern Critz was this high school where we used to actually, or elementary school rather, where we used to actually always go to play baseball in a little league. And around that there were these like this crescent of woods. And I used to go back there and play paintball all the time. And it was awesome. I mean, those woods were, I remember, I don't know, do people still go to baseball games with like their siblings and then like just go dick off in the woods? Like that's what I used to do when I used to go
awesome.
to that place.
See, I don't think that goes on anymore. I think now the little ones come and they go, it seems like all the ball fields have the little companion playground. So they're all hanging out on the playground, or they're just hanging out with their parents. See, I don't think it's like free form like that anymore, whereas like the little ones just go off on their own.
I remember there was a wall. I remember it was the wall of the building where people used to play Suicide all the time, which is like which I love. I love that game. And that's where you meet like there are big kids and little kids, and you'd be fucking horrified of because the big kids would be nailing you with the racquetball or whatever.
Tell me about your paintball campaigns though, because I thought this would come up for you. I remember you were really into this for a while, and I kind of largely missed the paintball thing. Just it was like a generational thing, and I remember you being really into it. Were these like full scale hour-long campaigns? How many people did you play with? Like,
yeah, we had probably, I would say, depending on the week, I was introduced to a group of people at school and also at Pat Med that played together. So it was like through hockey and some other people. And so we had a group of probably between 10 and 15 people that would play depending on the weekend. And we would all dress in total camo, like go to the Army surplus store.
That's awesome.
And we would split up into even teams, and we would break apart probably like a half a mile in these woods and like start in a center space and just be like, keep walking for like 15 minutes. And when it's 15 minutes is up, then like turn around and then like we can find each other. And I remember awesome. It was scary, dude. Like it didn't really hurt because we had so much stuff on, but like you're slinking, because if you get hit once, you're done. So you're like slinking through the woods, and you hear like, bah, bah, like if someone hear like you hear like the noise and you can kind of like hear the trajectory. It's the closest I will ever get probably to being in a war.
That's so cool.
And I remember getting hit in the head once. We used to wear these helmets, but I so clearly remember like the second before it happened, because you could see the ball. It was a red ball. You could see it arcing. Like, cause it's not like a bullet where it's traveling that fast. Like you can't shoot paintballs too quickly or they explode in your barrel. So you need to shoot, and you don't want to shoot them too slow or they don't break.
Right.
So but you can see them coming. Like if you, and like, I remember just being like, you see it, it's like boop, like right in your face, like, and like explodes. Great game.
So
like
fun.
really, I think Airsoft has largely taken over, but as far as I can tell, but they're different, but I loved paintball, and it was I had a spider gun, which was like a really expensive gun, and you would like carry around, if you had a ball explode in your barrel, it'd be like really just devastating. There was like the snake thing you'd like put in your barrel and like try to clean it while you were like getting fired upon. It was awesome.
Like an old
it was
musket.
Dude, it's dope.
Dude, I love it. I
feel like people would really enjoy playing it if they gave it, in the woods, not at one of those paintball places.
Oh, it sounds like a proper fantasy. The only time I ever did it, interestingly enough, really did it was with Dad. There was FDNY versus the police department versus the PD, and
didn't you get lit up or something? Something like that happened. Didn't something happen at that? Is there any story from that? I feel like
we were so exhausted. I remember the one thing, we were so exhausted that we were so tired that I drove home. I drove Dad's car home, and we were upstate. I think we were somewhere upstate in Orange County. I think I do remember that. It was an exhausting day, and I remember thinking like, we're gonna get killed. Like it's the firefighters. They're crazy, but we're facing cops. Like these guys know how to shoot. Yeah. They know guns. They know tactics. It's like it's like the crazy people versus the people that know what they're doing, basically. And I think it kind of played out like that. Like the firefighters were just nuts, and the cops were more reserved and tactical, and like we got our asses kicked.
Yeah, that's funny. I always think too. I never got to go to one, but a big tradition with the FDNY and the NYPD is their hockey rivalry where they play each other on Long Island and in New York City. It's awesome. Yeah, I always loved that. Like I always wanted an FDNY like jersey, like with their hockey jerseys.
That would be cool.
Yeah, but maybe one day.
Yeah.
The other thing I needed to bring up, Dig, is just a middle school memory. So I lived in New England, as everyone knows, for 5 years, and I would go back to Long Island for the summers. So I lived in Maine and New Hampshire, and in Maine, I got really into mountain biking. And so I'd be in the woods all the time in York, Maine, mountain biking, and that was a great time for me. But I thought that people would find funny that in 7th grade, when I lived in New Hampshire, I went to Nature's Classroom, which is a thing that exists. It's a proper noun, Nature's Classroom. It's like a you go away with your class for like a week or two.
Okay.
And you do things in the woods. And
I don't know about this.
People in New England, if you say that around them, they typically know what it is. And I think some people elsewhere, but I went to this thing and you like go away for a week and you basically you have like camp counselors but it's during the school year.
Okay.
And in 7th grade, I like had I don't remember the specifics of it. Mom might remember more, but like I had a really hard time like being away for some reason in 7th grade during this Nature's Classroom thing. I did it. I went through it because I remember like some kids like went home. It was probably in like, upstate New Hampshire, and you had to drive a few hours. So it was like a big pain in the ass to get back to Dover where I lived. And so the next year I didn't go. And I remember being the best decision ever because like 4 or 5 of us didn't go in that class. And then we just literally were in school all week just playing video games on like Apple II.
Just
computers.
you guys.
Yeah, just like it was like me and my friend Joe and a couple other people, like all very strategic. Like, we don't want to go to this.
That worked out.
Yeah, so I thought people would find that funny. If you're a New Englander, you'll remember Nature's Classroom. But of course, New England has wonderful woods and beautiful scenery up there, whether you're in Maine, whether you're in Vermont, of course, Vermont, the Green Mountains, the White Mountains in New Hampshire. Yeah. Beautiful up there. Connecticut's not very beautiful. Rhode Island's not very beautiful, but everything else is fine. And the other thing I needed to bring up just, in passing before I kick it back to you, if you have any other stories you want to tell, is even though we don't talk so much about our adulthood, I thought it would be interesting to bring up California, because California is so different than where we grew up in topographically, that both living in San Francisco for 10 years and then in LA for 3 years, I did a lot of interesting hikes, and we're in a lot of interesting places. California is a wonderful place for outdoors stuff, especially if you live in San Francisco or the Bay Area like I did, and you go to Tahoe, which is a few hours northeast of the Bay Area, it is stunning. Absolutely the most stunning stuff you will ever see in your life is in, jagged mountains and redwoods that are 1,000 years old. And just I remember with my ex Cheryl, who longtime fans will remember, we used to go hiking all the time, and we went hiking up in Tahoe. It was probably 2011 or 2012. And we were so in over our heads on this one trail. I remember we were just, and so I remember there being a tree where it was scratched, where a bear was clearly cleaning his claws or doing something like that as we were walking by. And I'm like, we are way over our heads on this trail. Cause I remember being in the parking lot down at the hill of this thing, and people had their guns and all of that, or knives strapped to them and stuff like that. And it's real serious up there. It's cool. And I highly recommend Lake Tahoe because you can do so much up there. You can do water sports, you can ski, you can hike, play hockey. You can run and do cross country stuff around there, shop. You can also cross the border into Nevada and gamble. There's right across the border is a town in Nevada called State Line, and it's a very, very, very small gambling town. And it's super cool. So a lot to do up there, but I had to give a shout out to that. Even though we don't talk too much in nostalgia about our adulthood, I would be loath not to bring up the beauty of California woods. The Northern California is infested with eucalyptus trees, which is true. And they came. So it's an invasive species that came from Australia. Someone brought it over for some reason, lumber or something. But if you go into a lot of the woods in Northern California, the more arid woods, they're basically totally taken over by eucalyptus trees.
Wow.
And that's only happened in the last 100 and 150 years.
That's crazy.
And then if you go further north from there into what's interesting about the redwood forest is that it never rains, or it very atypically rains up there. And yet it is very moist because it is always so foggy. And they think that is what feeds the slow life of these trees. And you don't understand what a redwood is until you stand next to one. You can look at a picture of it, but it's nuts. It's absolutely bonkers how big these trees are.
That's fascinating.
So have to recommend hiking up there as well.
Oh, dude. I've been fascinated with Northern California and the redwood forest ever since Return of the Jedi.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Ever since Endor.
Awesome
I'm
stuff.
that place is real. There's a tunnel built through that tree for cars. It's insane.
Yeah, and they have cool little things where they sometimes a tree will fall and die, so they'll take a ring out of it, or a circle out of it, and then put it up on a huge placard, and then they'll have little arrows, and they'll say this was when Charlemagne signed the Magna Carta. This is when Columbus sailed the ocean. This, and they would point to the specific arrows of the specific years, which is cool.
Can you imagine? There's something so cool about trees. In fact, it's funny. I was thinking about this. You'll remember this tree in Brookhaven, again, where we grew up, in front of St. James Church. Remember that old, gnarled, huge tree that was out front? So
yes.
The thing about that tree is there was this old, huge tree. I mean, it had to be hundreds of years old. And it was one of those massive trees that you could never even hope to get your arms around. It was so thick. And it had all those bulbs, and it looked like it was kind of like a melting candle. It was just, every time. The thing about that tree, first of all, is that you had, in order to get in and out of Brookhaven Hamlet, at least in that direction, there was 2 ways really out of there. And you had to, in order to get out in one direction, up towards the high school, you had to pass that tree. So we saw it every day. And I would just think, can you imagine? It was almost like the redwoods, where it was how many things has this tree seen? How many years, fads, styles of dress, different eras of automobiles. This tree has been privy to so much. If it had eyeballs, if it had lips to talk,
right.
It probably, talk about historical, that thing was there for so long. And that just plays into forests for me too. The fascinating thing about it, that is, I think, why we love it, why it's a retreat for us, why we want to escape to nature and the woods, is that's the natural state of Earth. Of course, you have oceans, and you have deserts, and you have tundra and other types of environments, but that's
Taiga.
one of the main what'd you say?
Taiga, that's the tundra meets forest in Russia. Taiga.
Very fancy. Very fancy.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's undisturbed, undeveloped, the earth as it should be. And I think there's a certain there's a certain fascination in that. As you said, the foliage, the trees, the wildlife, a lot of the times we associate it with bodies of fresh water or beautiful scenery, maybe mountains, but that's what's so cool about it. There's one stretch of woods that I have to give a shout out to that I thought about as I was bullet pointing some of my different experiences as a kid, and you'll know this place, Kyle. Although I'm curious to see how different it was for you. And that is the woods behind our high school. Again, in Brookhaven, behind Belport High School. And why it was such an important part of my life as a high schooler was I took that very sort of played out, in retrospect, trajectory of like, I'm too cool for my high school. Like I just didn't want to be there. A lot of my friends were in other school districts. There weren't too many people that skateboarded in school with me, so I knew a lot of kids from neighboring districts, and I just didn't. From probably 10th grade on, I just was over it, So every time, me and a couple of other friends who happened to skate, my friend Adam, my friend Andy, who was a year older than me, every time there was a pep rally, we decided we were going to get out of Dodge, right? So a couple of times a year, we were gonna not attend the pep rally. So the pep rally was like midway through the day or something. We were gonna break north. So there was a stretch. Fortunately, there was like a perimeter of woods around the back fields of our high school. So we had the track and a baseball field, a couple of football fields, the parking lot and everything like that. And behind that ran like in a U shape, basically woods. So we were able to just ditch pretend we were going to the pep rally, walk right out of the auditorium, straight to the woods. And now if you crossed the football fields in a diagonal, you could get where we were going much quicker, which is the backwoods and then the railroad tracks. And then on the other side of that, not too far away, was like the pizzeria and the deli, eventually the video store, so you could rent like Nintendo cartridges and stuff. There was a candy shop back there at one time, a couple other things. There was a tiny surf shop there, a short-lived surf shop there for a little while. So we would be able to go and just get a slice of pizza, get a drink, do all that kind of stuff. But if you crossed the football field, you were out in the open. So there was a decent chance you were going to get caught, or you were going to get seen, and then you would get like a detention or whatever. So if you went in the U shape around the woods, it would take longer, but there was only a very small expanse that you had to cross that was out in the open. And once you cleared that, you were home free, because you would just go in that U shape. It would take a little while, and then you would get to where you were going, Ragtime or Jim's Deli or whatever. And so most of the time we didn't risk it. We just, we would cross that little expanse, 50 paces or whatever, and get to the woods. And very rarely do we get seen. But that woods always reminded me of being in high school, because, it always represented freedom to me. And it was always a little bit fun to cross that wide open area, and then become home free. And then like you felt like you achieved a sense of victory, because you weren't seen, you broke out, you probably weren't going to get noticed. I don't know that the teachers were really keeping track of the pep rallies anyway, but we felt like we were getting over. So
yeah, you're accomplished for sure. Yeah.
And then there was really cool. Shout out to my friend Eric, who I grew up with, who I think listens to the show, and Jason too. But Eric was a really good BMXer. Like, he was a competitive BMXer, and there were some really cool BMX tracks back there. I don't know if you remember that. Like, there were berms and jumps and stuff. And I think he and his friends, if not the slightly older generation at that time, made all that stuff. So they were able to do all this crazy BMX stuff. And I remember this stuff was just, I always talk about my fear of biking. Like, I just wasn't good at BMX, although I thought it was badass. And I remember just looking at those jumps and stuff and being like, this stuff is too big for me. Like, I can't, like I could barely bunny hop on a BMX bike.
Dude, I mean, because I had my couple years of BMXing in high school. It's hard to avoid that. It's hard on Long Island. I feel like it's hard to avoid either. You're going to be, maybe you'll skate, aggressive inline was the thing when I was a kid, although that's not really a thing anymore, which I thought was kind of corny. And then, a lot of people would like to go skiing and snowboarding. You were going to get into something,
sure,
I think, like that. And I gravitated towards BMX for a few years. I had a sweet red line and all of that. But I remember doing my first jump on one of those kinds of things and bailing immediately, being like, oh, no.
Oh, man.
I remember watching, there was a place I used to go in Pat Med that was, it's quite memorable because it's like those huge power conduits, that just like run down, like they're huge things. They're bringing, I guess, power from.
Oh,
a power
sure.
plant,
Yeah.
the
high tension lines.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was like underneath one of those was like these sets of ramps, like near Brookhaven Multiplex, actually. And I used to watch people, and I did a few things there, but I used to watch people and be like, holy fuck. Like, I don't even, not even doing anything, but just literally the act of just jumping and landing your bike was like a huge thing for me. And I eventually was able to do that, but I never, and what's so shitty is I ended up breaking my shoulder on BMX doing nothing.
Oh, that's always how it goes. Dude, always.
Doing like, not that I was ever crazy, but I'm like, man, I could have broken all sorts of bones doing some of the shit I did. And then my chain just breaks when I'm fucking riding the work. It's like, damn, dude.
That's brutal.
That sucks.
That's brutal. Well, I mean, the thing with BMXing and jumping, I give you a lot of credit for doing it, because my thing with that was there was no stepping up difficulty wise. It's like, what is the margin for error? Or what is like, what is that initial time of doing it? You can't really bail. So it's like, once it's like, just, I guess it's a feeling of like, okay, I think I'm ready to commit to this now. Because the margin for error for a big jump or a big berm or something like that is like, I don't know, man. Like, you have to feel like you're proper and ready for that before you commit. It's not like learning how to kickflip on a skateboard and just do it into the grass or something for a little while. You could step up in difficulty and kind of make your way towards certain milestones. But with BMX, it's like, it's heavy. And I think freestyle was just hard, and I think BMX racing was just like, it was BMX almost like dope. Motocross. I mean, really, except you don't have the momentum and the speed, so maybe even a little more dangerous. I don't know, but shouts out to that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I remember bailing by you would let the bike go, like let it move forward, like release it so that you stay back and like kind of fall backwards.
That makes sense
as the bike goes forward.
That's the only way.
But because I don't know what the, you just meet these older kids. You never see these kids again after you stop doing it, and they give you all sorts of advice, like about what you're supposed to do. So who knows what I was doing right or wrong, but it is funny to think about those days, and I loved being on my bike and BMXing and doing all that stuff. But it was one of those things. It's funny you say that, because to me, skateboarding, I skated I guess throughout my young life, but I wasn't very good. And in college, I would just skate to and fro. I told you that a lot of people remember me as being a skater in college, like people that knew me kind of passed me. And it's like, no, you just remember me having a deck with me all the time, because I would skate to class or I would skate to your apartment, but I wasn't like doing anything. I was just put my deck down and skate places.
Transportation.
Right.
Sure.
And, but I wouldn't ever have considered myself part of the culture or whatever, as it were. But yeah, I mean, are there any other stories that you wanted to bring up before we go?
You know what, the other thing I thought of associated with the woods that I thought of that made me laugh? Speaking about my friends from other school districts that I grew up with in high school, I was friendly with a lot of kids in a neighboring school district called Sayville and Oakdale. Particularly my friend Matt Kalin, who was a really great friend of mine, even through my adult life. And I haven't seen him in a long time, but he attended high school out there with a lot of our friends who PJ and I would later go on to become really great friends with. Our friend Bob, our friend Dino, Double Dork. We talk about Phil and Sam. Shout out to those guys, Matt. And those guys were always up to no good. They were always doing something that they shouldn't have been doing. Like, I remember them like exploring these old concrete depots and like climbing these crazy, treacherous things that they shouldn't have been involved with. They loved it. My friend Matt just loved exploring, He eventually went to FIT in New York, where Allie went to school, and like figured out a way to get onto one of the buildings of the dorms. Like, he was always up to something, Matt. He was always down for an event. Good, really good kid, awesome dude, but like always down for like some mischief. So, and he just really loved to explore. Like, he had that little kid thing in him that he just didn't shake free of. He was just always like a little kid in that way. Those guys found, you may remember this, Carl. They found this abandoned warehouse in the woods, somewhere in Sayville or Oakdale, somewhere in that area. And it wasn't like, it was kind of in a neighborhood, so it wasn't like deep into the woods. But there was a warehouse that wasn't being used, that still had power and still had heat. And it still had like this giant sort of warehouse space in the center. Then it had little satellite offices around the exterior of this building. So it had like furniture and stuff like that. Now, it seemed like, for all intents and purposes, like this place had been abandoned. There was old like skids thrown in there. It looked like a bunch of people piled stuff in the middle of the thing, but it became like a skate park for us. And whoever discovered it, we would go there at night because it wasn't a neighborhood. So we wanted to kind of go out where it would be not under the watchful eyes of people in the neighborhood. And they would go into this little woods, into this warehouse, and they would skate. And, they would bring girls and they would hang out, have beers or smoke weed, whatever the people did. I was all about skating at that point. I was 16. So me and my friend Adam, who I grew up with in Brookhaven, one of the few dudes around that I actually went to school with that skated, and our friend Dino from Blue Point would go over, and one night we decided we're going to sleep over at Loop. This place was called Loop Lock, and I think it was Loop Lock Pool Covers is what it was, some kind of pool supply manufacturer. But they weren't, it was abandoned or they weren't using it, whatever it was. And we went, and I told Mom and Dad, now this is the only time I ever got grounded in my life. Told Mom and Dad I was staying at Dino's house for the night. But Mom and Dad were smart enough to call Dino's parents and being like, how are the boys doing? They'd be like, Dino's mom was like, they're not here. They're somewhere else. Turns out I stayed over in this place all night. We skated, we hung out, we did graffiti on the walls inside. Like it was like, it was like one of those experiences, because I really was a good kid. Like I was really under Mom and Dad's thumb. I didn't do too much outside of the periphery of their rules. Like if they said be home at a certain time, I might have fudged it a little bit, but for the most part, I wasn't trying to act out. This one night, I just thought it was worth it. We were skating, we were having an awesome time. I think I hadn't known Matt that long yet, I don't think. And when I met him, he was already an awesome skateboarder, and he was really into art, and he was just like a kindred spirit. And I was like really drawn to him. I was like, I'm obsessed with Matt for a little while. Like, he was the first new friend that I met in a while that I was like, this dude's a lot like me. Like he was into video games. Like he was one of the few dudes who had a turbo graphics. Like he was into anime. Like I was just like, this dude's like me, like the Sayville version of me. I dug him. Yeah. I just dug him. And so like Matt, and besides like just being really inspired by his skateboarding, like I was like, it's worth it. Like it's gonna be worth it to do this, and I'll take the fallout in the morning, whatever the punishment's going to be, it's going to be worth it. So I get home that day, and Mom tells the story of Dad happened to be home that morning that I came back. They already knew I was lying. They were super worried. I was 16 years old. I was in 10th or 11th grade. I guess I was in 11th grade. And you're not thinking like that from a 16-year-old perspective. It's completely selfish. It was like, I wanted to have fun. I probably dug some chick there. I wanted to hang out with Matt. I was with Adam and Dino. Like I was just in my comfort zone, and I was just like, whatever the punishment's going to be, it's fine. I ended up getting punished for a month and getting my skateboard taken away, which never happened to me before. And they stuck to their guns. Like Adam would come call for me. Can Dagan come out after school? They were like, no, Dagan's not going. You don't understand. Dagan's not going anywhere. You know what I mean? Like they really stuck to their guns as far as grounding me. And I'll never forget that. And then the skateboard ended up being hidden in the most fucking obvious place when they gave it to me after like 4 weeks. And I remember my friends put like a beater board together for me out of scraps. Like somebody had old trucks, somebody had an old Everslick board. Like they put a board together for me, and I would go out and skate it when I could sneak away. But like I couldn't find my skateboard. I remember Mom going down the basement. There was a piece of furniture at the bottom of the stairs. I looked everywhere. I was in the crawl space. Like I was everywhere. She opens this drawer, and there's a skateboard right at the bottom of the basement stairs. I'm like, it's been there the whole time?
Was it in that like peach hutch or whatever?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's where it was, like in the bottom of the two drawers or whatever. But I always remember that. I'll always remember that being in the woods, because not only were we able to get away with, being in there at night, and you think of this place was massive. It was a massive warehouse. All the noise skateboards make. But like, I remember being sheltered enough where I felt, because I was really into graffiti. I thought it was fucking awesome, but I'd never had the balls to actually do it. And I remember being, it being kind of sequestered enough where it was like, I could do some graffiti in here. Like I did a little character, my little goofy monkey character with a knit hat and the $sign medallion that he wore around his neck or whatever. And yeah, dude, like that. And that was literally the only time I did. Not only was it the only time I ever got grounded, it was my kids don't believe this. It was the only time I ever did anything warranted of getting grounded. But when Dad was there that day, I remember I'm walking up the driveway and Dad was coming out like to see me or whatever. And Mom like getting in front of him and being like, I got him. Like, I got him, Jerry. I got him, like type thing. And being like, giving me like the tongue lashing, but like basically, who knew? Who knew what Dad was going to do at that at that time?
I'm surprised he didn't focus your board or something at the very least. It's kind of cool that they put it away instead of obliterating the deck.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, I
can see Dad putting a deck down and just sideways and just focusing it. So like,
can you imagine that?
Yeah, again,
I think my friend Adam's dad was kind of a dick. His stepdad, maybe it was his stepdad, who would, I think he did do that. Like he would take it, or he would like take the trucks off and throw them out, so he only had the wheels and the board. Like, just really like putting the screws in, like cruelty. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, how do you do that?
When Dad used to just steal my keyboard or my mouse and nothing else. Thanks, Dad.
Shout out to Dad.
I tried so hard to learn how to use Windows 95 without a mouse. Like, you can, but it's so impossible to use. Like, you have to use the tab button and like.
That's funny that you even tried.
Yeah. Oh my God. I was like, I'm not going to like I said, it was always something in the phone cord, like the phone line from the computer, but nothing else.
Yes.
So like I was like, damn, Dad, you are
Dad,
very sadistic. Take the controllers, just the PlayStation controllers or, whatever.
How old was Dad? Let's figure this out. How old was Dad when he was doing taking the keyboard thing?
Late 40s, probably. Early 50s,
right, yeah.
I would say. Late 40s.
I was going to say that's a little too old for because I will say from my experience, you accrue patience as you go on as a parent. Like, a lot of it is experience, especially if you have multiple kids, but a lot of it is just kind of coming out of that younger, headier, impatient years of like just aging, accruing wisdom. And I think patience just comes with that, but yeah, late 40s seems like, I'm sorry, Dad, I can't help you there. That seems like a bridge too far. I was trying to bail you out, but
we had a sort of, it was kind of adversarial sometimes, so I can picture Dad being like, I got you, motherfucker. Like, in his mind, like, I got you. You have no idea, but I got you. Just by taking this 2-foot phone cord from your computer, you're done. And I actually remember I remember even getting around that and him figuring it out because my Dreamcast had a phone cord in it too. And I would just say like, okay. And then I would just take the Dreamcast phone cord and put it into the other Ethernet port.
Okay.
And then he would come in and be like, what are you doing? Or whatever. And be like, oh, I'm just, typing some things. But I'd be like, getting instant messages or something, like whatever it was. Or like you'd hear like, bing, it was like, really loud on my computer, like that. Or like the shutting door, like you would think you'd forget your speakers were on and then it'd be like the shutting AOL door
sound effect
of someone leaving and Dad would be like, yeah.
What were you getting punished for though?
It was like grades and, I actually didn't do very bad in high school. So I think Dad was kind of, I didn't get along with him. Like I wanted to do my own thing and I had kind of a bad year in 10th grade into 11th grade. That's when I did a lot of, like you were saying, like you didn't do anything really to get punished.
No, nothing
but
untoward at all.
I did.
Nothing.
So I definitely did. So it's then I got away with most of it. I mean, Dad knows all of it because I was so, and he likes to talk about this. I confess when I do something wrong. So he always knew that I did something wrong, but I did some stupid shit. Nothing horrible. But.
Yeah, because you were smart. You tested your boundaries. Like for some reason, I don't know if this speaks to my stupidity, and we've talked about this on the show before, even as a little kid, but as an older kid too. I was missing that component where it was like, what are they really going to do? What are they really going to do to me? I never thought that once. I just thought whatever they said went. Why? That doesn't make any sense. It was like, what was I going to do when they tucked me in as an 8-year-old and I heard 3-year-old in the summertime at 7 o'clock and I heard 3-year-olds outside playing and I went outside to play. What were they really going to do? What were they going to do?
Can't go back and figure it. I mean, I don't know. Who knows? I think a lot of it depends on who was home and.
It didn't even
I think about that all the time now too.
Favorite kid status. It didn't. It's for nothing. You would think now if they just loved me the best, or if there was a level of appreciation, it would have been it wasn't worth it. I wish I could go back and be a rebel.
It's funny you bring it up because I think about that all the time where like, because I live in a neighborhood with an army of kids, like I said, and there's just a little, we actually call them the gutter children because there's like a culvert that runs like across like everyone's yards. So that's like what splits people's yards up. Like, and kids use it as a thoroughfare to get like different people's houses. So we call them the gutter kids. But some like these kids are between, I don't know, 8 or 10. And some of these kids are outside at like 8 at night and they're like barely able to walk.
Wow.
You know, I'm like, what's going on out here? You know,
That's old school. I like that.
Yeah, this neighborhood's pretty old school.
I like that.
I feel like it's got a little bit of an old school
Maybe
flair.
with these younger generations that have little ones now, they'd be your age, around your age.
Yeah, they're millennials,
probably.
I guess, yeah.
Maybe it's coming full circle, you know, where the sheltered children of the Gen Xers, like me and my kids, you know. Like, there's a woods here. Let me tell you about this. And you know it. If you think about it, on the way to Wawa, outside, you know, you go out my neighborhood, the kids' elementary school is there.
Well, there's that building that looks like it's falling down in that.
Yes, they're abandoned greenhouses. It was a nursery at one point many years ago. I don't think that was an operating nursery since the 80s. But there's like a for some reason there's like a smokestack in there, and then there's like these old abandoned greenhouse buildings, like a whole complex of them. Dude, I would be in there fucking day in and day out seeing what the hell is going on in there. The wild animals. I always see foxes and raccoons running in there at night because it's right on the way to Wawa. And I don't even put that in my kid's head because I'm a little bit afraid of them doing that. What I'm telling you is I'm part of the problem.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Well, you know what you did, and you also know what your kids are capable of handling. They might not be capable of it because they didn't grow up like you know? So you don't really know what they're, you know, they didn't, you have to kind of work your way up to that. And if they didn't take any baby steps in that regard because it's just a different age.
Yeah. Like, what would they do with that freedom if given the freedom? I'm not sure. It's a good question.
Yeah, it's like incrementalism. Like, I don't think you can give them so much freedom right away. I think you have to work your way up. But I totally agree. I mean, I'm so enamored with the YouTube channels that like go to dead old malls and like old buildings and
That's
stuff.
Awesome stuff.
I love to do that, like the urban adventuring where people like break in. It's illegal, but I think it's awesome. Like the people that go to Detroit and just break into shit. It's
do they really?
I mean, yeah, it's like, why not?
Get
I
on
mean,
that.
might as well. Yeah, like look up the series Dead Malls, I think it's called. It's there's some really cool shit.
Yeah, you were telling me about that before.
I like that kind of stuff, the urban decay. It's crazy how quickly nature reclaims things.
Yes.
It happens so much quick. Because I think I said this, like I always questioned in post-apocalyptic literature and in games and stuff. I'm like, would it really be this bad? Like already? Like you think about The Last of Us, it's 20 years by when you start playing it that the earth fell apart, and it's like horrifying. Yeah. But then people are no, like you look around and you're like, no, that actually would probably happen. All it would take was like a sprung water leak in one of these pipes, and then a broken window, and then dirt comes in, and then animals come in, and then before, a few years later, this thing is done. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know. Think about your own yard. I also feel like I love natural reclamation, especially if I could think of an old abandoned shopping mall and like the way nature creeps back in. I think also nature does this thing. It's hard to describe, but it's like, it's like, all right, we could come back here. And then it just that the speed and the evolution intensifies once it knows it's okay. Like once it knows it's got room to expand, it's like, all right, we're just going to keep, all right, we're allowed to just keep doing this. Like it almost like thinks it through, it's like we're allowed to come back. And I love that. Cool. I love the look of it. The look of it.
Yeah, me too.
Fascinating.
Like trees growing inside buildings. And so I always love that image.
So cool.
Like where there's like a broken rooftop and there's enough sun, and then the seed or the cone or whatever ends up there. And then you have a 10-year-old sprouting tree or whatever. It's pretty neat. Dave, should we end with a dad joke?
Yes, indeed. I got one here on my smartphone. Speaking of landscapers, I hope they weren't too loud outside. I knew they were going to come while we were recording.
Oh, don't worry about it. Who cares?
Okay, let's see what I got here. I got a good one, I think. All right, Kyle. Yeah, this is an interesting one. I always get interested that I've never seen a dad joke before. Even after these few years of doing the show, week in and week out, we still come up with new dad jokes. So I like that. All right, let's see. I knew there was one. Okay, yeah, let's do this one. Kyle, what do a tick and the Eiffel Tower have in common?
I don't know. I'm trying to. What is it?
They're both Paris sites.
Oh, I was thinking of French. I was trying to think of French words, but yeah, that's good. That's fine.
Not bad.
No, it's not good, but it's not bad.
We've done worse.
Yeah. Well, you have. Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to lump you in there.
Yeah. Don't try to blame me for this.
I'm sorry. That wasn't fair. Well,
Dave, thank you for your time. I appreciate you. Hope everything's going well in your life.
Thank you, my friend. Congratulations again.
Today. Thank you.
Big things.
Yeah, for all of us, hopefully. And thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of our show. Remember to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia. Early ad-free access to this show, Sacred Symbols, Defining Duke, access to Sacred Symbols Plus, and Defining Duke Ultimate. Go support us on YouTube, leave us nice reviews on iTunes, etc., and so on. We really appreciate you, and we hope you enjoy the content. We could not do it without you.
No.
We will see you next time on more KnockBack. Until then, goodbye.
Salut.
KnockBack, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. KnockBack's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. Stan's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including KnockBack, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.